We're joined now by Democratic Senator from Indiana and member of the Banking Committee, Senator Evan Bayh. Senator Bayh is set to announce a series of fiscal reforms on deficit reduction with Senator John McCain.
Senator Bayh, we've got so much to cover. Of course, the President of the United States betraying Hoosiers, saying he wants the Saints to win the Super Bowl. We'll talk about that in a minute. But before we do that, let's talk.
Nobody's perfect.
Exactly.
Nobody's perfect. But on the other hand, he is providing you a little bit of political relief, talking about deficit reduction. Obviously, the president's base, a lot of progressives are feeling betrayed this morning. But I would guess that you are not. You think this is a good move to have a 3-year discretionary freeze on domestic spending.
Joe, it was a good move, it was a strong move, and I think people across this country will say it's about time. You know, as we've discussed previously on this show, we are in an unsustainable fiscal path. It's going to harm our economy. It's going to harm our children's future. In language I think most Americans can understand, Joe, we can no longer continue to spend money we do not have. That leads to big problems down the road, and the president is now in the process of correcting that. And I think a big part of the political problem that Democrats have is that people look at Washington, ordinary families, small businesses, they're having to make tough decisions. They're having to tighten their belts to make ends meet, and they don't think Congress is doing that. So Congress needs adult supervision. The president is providing that. I say hallelujah.
Well, you know, the polls out of Florida just came out today in the Rubio-Charlie Crist race. It shows Marco Rubio ahead of Charlie Crist in that Senate race, but it also shows the president upside down, more unpopular in Florida than popular, a state obviously that he carried last year. The same with Indiana. Does this help the president break through and show himself to people in states like Indiana, in states like Florida, in states like Iowa, that he really could be a post-partisan transformative president?
Joe, it does. We need to speak directly to independents, moderate Republicans, and say, look, we're going to pursue a common sense path to get this country back on the right path. We're going to do practical things that help you in your daily lives. A jobs bill with tax incentives for job creation to help small businesses grow. Fiscal discipline to get the deficit down, to deal with our long-term problems and to relate to ordinary families who are having to make these tough decisions. Energy independence to get us off of these imports of oil. Things like that, Joe. Common sense solutions that show we're in touch with the ordinary Americans dealing with their problems. It's not only the right substantive thing to do, it's also the shrewd political thing to do.
Gene, let's talk about how shrewd this is politically. Obviously, the president brings back a lot of independence by talking about these tax incentives that we just played a clip of, also tackling the deficit. It's just not debatable. Independents are concerned about the explosive growth of the deficit, but at the same time, he depresses his own base. How difficult is this going to be for the president to thread the needle?
Well, I think he could probably do it on this one, in that I think politically it is shrewd. It does appeal to independents and others who are concerned about the deficit and who isn't concerned about the deficit long term. I think my question is, in terms of the economy, how do you get this economy going again? And by announcing a freeze even on discretionary spending, which, as we know, is not the bulk of what the government spends anyhow.
Could I ask you about that really quickly, Gene, and follow up, because it's a great point. Democrats, liberals have been suggesting for the past year that if you want to kickstart the economy, you need the federal government to grow, and you need to stimulate that economy with government spending. I understand that this is symbolic. It's 19% of the budget. I would suggest it's important symbolically, but doesn't that also say that progressives are wrong, that Paul Krugman is wrong, that you don't revive the economy by having the federal government spend money, that in fact, right now, we need to freeze spending? That's the president's message, right?
Well, that seems to be his message. Now, are you a Keynesian or are you not a Keynesian? Do you believe that a government can, in fact, create economic activity by essentially spending money, or do you not believe that? I've never been accused of being an economist, but it does make sense to me that you need to put more money into the system if you want to get it, unstuck and get the economy really producing again. As everyone knows, you can run a certain level of deficit as long as you have economic growth, and you can't run the deficits we've been running. Obviously, this is look, nobody says this is sustainable. It is. We have to bring this under control. It's a question of timing, and my guess would be that the macroeconomic impact, since we're really talking about just a fraction of the federal budget, the macroeconomic impact is probably not that huge.
We're talking about 19% of the federal budget.
I think you can make a really good argument that the political benefits outweigh the whatever macroeconomic downside there would be to it.
I don't think there's any doubt that there will be great political benefits to this decision, especially in the middle. Senator Bayh, let's look back, though, over the past year. Look at how the president's numbers have fallen not only across America, but also in your home state of Indiana. Did the president obsess on health care reform for too long? And is this a good move away from health care reform?
Well, I think his emphasis on helping middle-class families is right on target. I expect this budget discipline, restraining spending, will be well received by people across my state who are having to make these same hard decisions. They're going to say, finally, Washington is in touch with what I'm having to go through. I think an intent focus on job creation, particularly helping small businesses create jobs, would resonate very well in my state.
So Senator, did he stay on health care for too long?
Well, of course it took too long, Joe. I mean, we can all say that with the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, and I think the real problem there was it's a noble thing to do. And people tend to forget, we extended health care coverage to every child in the country last year. That is a wonderful, progressive thing to do. And we can have progressive government in this country, but you got to take it a step at a time. You got to be in touch with the times that you're in, and going with the large bill during the middle of the worst recession since the 1930s and a major new expenditure at a time when we were running $1 trillion deficit just didn't resonate real well. Yeah. So, Monday morning quarterbacking is not something I'm into, but you got to learn from these sorts of things, and going forward, let's do what we can in a common sense way.
And Donnie Deutsch, I'm sorry, Donnie Deutsch, let's talk about, again, we talk about branding, and you and I have been talking about the problems with the Republican brand, especially in the Northeast. It's practically non-existent, or at least it was before the past 3 or 4 months, and when Republicans started winning in the Northeast. Let's look at the Democratic side of that brand, too. You look where Evan Bayh is, where Mary Landrieu is in Louisiana. You look at all of these Democrats that are fleeing their seats as quickly as possible in Arkansas, in Tennessee. You look at the polls that show, well, here's a poll Mike Pence, who hasn't announced, is deadlocked with Evan Bayh, an extraordinarily popular senator out of Indiana. Do we have the reverse problem with Democrats who don't seem to get that what they've done over the past year has damaged their brand in Indiana, in Florida, in all of these states that Barack Obama carried that just 4 years earlier George W. Bush had carried?
Well, clearly Senator Bayh gets it, but the challenge is, and it's interesting, Joe, you referenced it, that I think I was on here 8 weeks ago when we were talking about the damaged Republican brand, and now we're talking about the damaged Democrat brand. And I don't know, even if we wind back the clock in hindsight, and clearly putting health care forward, mistake. It should have been a subset of the economy. But I want to kind of spin this to Senator Bayh, because even with hindsight, I go, okay, the game is jobs. America votes with their pocketbook. And yes, we know we've got to clear the deficit. We've got to reduce the deficit. Having said that, and Senator Bayh, I want to turn it to you. We wind the clock back now, or even start today. We've got to create jobs. And instead of just a blanket statement, a benefit for small businesses, how would this president have created more jobs today if we wound the clock back 11 months, and if there wasn't a solution, we'd still be in the same place, and whatever brand is in office would be damaged, and everything else is just discussion. So I'm turning to you. So basically, let's wind the clock back or do it forward. Either one, we've got to get rid of 20% unemployment. We have to do it within a year. I don't think it's possible, so I think all the discussion is basically philosophical, but not real.
Well, Donnie, we obviously faced really difficult circumstances. This president inherited most of this mess. By the way, the fiscal problem was out of control the day he came into office already.
Exactly.
The economy was in free fall, so a lot of this was on his doorstep. And you're right, we were going to face tough going no matter what. But you ask with the benefit of hindsight, you know, how could we deal with these things? I think an unrelenting focus on job creation. Some of that stimulus bill, look, it was, you had to do something. You couldn't just do nothing. But it should have been more directly targeted. Congress...
Give me, for instance, as I said, Senator, once again, create the jobs for me right now.
I'll give you, for instance, Donnie, there were 6,000 earmarks in one of these budgets that came along. Get that stuff out of there. Create a tax credit for new job creation. Say to every business across this country, and more for small than large, if you create a new job, we're going to give you a tax credit of fill in the blank, $1,000, whatever it would take. That would start getting these businesses thinking, instead of being so scared, thinking, I can't hire anybody else, they're going to start thinking, well, wait a minute, there's something in this for me if I hire someone else. Those are the kind of things we need to be doing.
Senator Bayh, it's interesting listening to you over the past few months. You've sounded like someone who's striking a good balance of being critical of this administration as well as supportive when necessary. And then just looking at
he's talking about deficits nonstop over the past year.
You sound like a guy who might actually...
When nobody else was talking about deficits in his party, he was.
And you might be striking just the right tone, given the fact that you actually are being given a run for money in your next election. We were just looking at these poll numbers coming up. This is not a shoo-in for you.
Well, Mika, this is a tough time for any incumbent, and people are mad. I think Donnie made an excellent point. They're mad at Democrats. They're mad at Republicans. They're just angry about the situation. I've seen polls that have me in a stronger position than the one you probably just showed your viewers. But the important thing is that we focus on what matters to people. Job creation, getting the deficit under control, sensible health care reform that will matter to them right now. And if you do that, the polls take care of themselves. And I think the poll in my case is very illustrative, Joe. People really like me personally, I'm happy to say. They think I'm doing a good job for them. It's a lot of this other stuff in Washington that's going on that has them upset. And so that's what we got to focus. Change business as usual in Washington. If I had one message this morning, that's it.
Exactly, and I'll tell you, Senator, again, you can pull the tapes from this show, Mika, over the past year. You were the first in your party, the first senator in your party to start warning America about debt, about rising deficits, about a need to focus on jobs. When everybody else was sleeping through the spring and the summer, you came here just day in. Every time you came on, you kept talking about it. I think you're right, Senator. I think at the end, the polls do take care of those who actually listen to their voters. And you've been doing that, obviously.
Speak the truth.
Thank you, Joe. By the way, you know where you guys are this morning? You're in what we call Greater Indiana.
Greater Indiana, yes.
It's a great city.
Very good.
We love Chicago. Senator Bayh, thank you very much.